If we look at the map, we know for Abraham used to dwell in the area near the Gerar, which is southeast of Gaza. And as she departed from that area, she moved to Beersheba, which is, right now we have a city there in the Idumean desert. And it's about, if you go for the Google map, you'll find about maybe 45 kilometers between these two points. And it takes usually about maybe 3 to 4 days, depends how fast you walk. So by the time she reached Beersheba, which is about maybe 50 kilometers from Gerar, the water was spent in the bottle. And she started desperately looking for the well. Well, if the hadith is correct, then she might depart, supposedly she departed from Gerar and walked down the Mecca area. So the distance between Mecca and Gerar is about 1,350 kilometers. So she will need it to walk at least 1 month. But because the Torah suggested she had only 1 jar of the water and she didn't refill it on the way, so it's absolutely impossible for her to walk such a distance with 1 skin or jar of water on her shoulder. Well, the hadith, as we know, speaks about that Abraham brought her, so she didn't really walk so far in the distance, but Abraham brought her and a child with him to the area of Mecca. I want to use the same verse from the Torah, but focus on different words. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took the bread and a bottle of water and gave it to Hagar. So here we focus on he rose up early in the morning. What happened before that? Did he travel for 30 days to Mecca from Gerar? Well, if we look for verses prior to this, we'll find out then Sarah was very displeased with Ishmael, mocking Isaac, and she told her husband, get rid of Hagar and her son. And Abraham didn't like this idea. But God talked to him and said, don't worry, Abraham, let them go because I will take care of them. They are still your son. Ishmael is still your son. I'll take care of him. You don't worry about it. All you have to do is just follow advice of your wife. And next thing happened is Abraham rose up early in the morning. So it means he did not travel for 1 month. He was sleeping 8 hours in his tent. Therefore, I have to conclude that the hadith speaking about a story of Abraham bringing Hagar and Ishmael into the Kaaba is wrong. If the Torah is true word of God, uncorrupted, so the stories, whatever happened with Abraham, Ishmael and Hagar, the truth on the pages of the Torah, then the Quran and the Hadith are at fault. Well, in the conclusion, let us summarize. Well, the story according to the Hadith and the Quran suggests that Abraham brought Hagar and Ishmael to the Kaaba, the place the Kaaba will be built eventually, the Mecca area, and later on he built the Kaaba with Ishmael. But as we just discovered from the story of the Torah, using 4 small details, which is 1 bottle of water, place in Beersheba. The fact was water was spent on the bottle, and that Abraham rose up early in the morning. We can use these small and insignificant arguments. We can say that the Torah proof that the story of the Quran and the Hadith are in error. And now I'd like to focus on other subject of Abraham and the sacrifice he offered to God. Let me read from the Torah from Genesis 22, 2 and 4. And God said, take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, and I don't mind, it could be Ishmael, whom you loveth, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for the burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw place far off. So we have very important details here. God said to Abraham, bring your son to the land of Moriah. And the second one, we have a time frame how many days Abraham traveled. So we know from the Bible the land of Moriah is there Jerusalem is. So if we will look at the map and we trace from Gerar to the Jerusalem, we'll find it's maybe distance about maybe 95 kilometers. So as they travel, they might travel for 3-4 days on donkeys. Bible said, then Abraham on the third day of journey lifted up his eyes and saw a place far off. So he still probably walk another day or so. So we have a time frame of travel. If Ishmael were living in Mecca and Abraham came to visit him in Mecca and try to bring him as a sacrifice to God, then he should have traveled for 1 month. But the Bible specifically speaks about it, 3 days of travel. So therefore, if it could be Ishmael or Isaac, at this point it's not really important, but what's important is a place. And it tells us that Abraham really didn't even go to the Mecca area because there's no reason for him to be in the desert. He went to a place where Jerusalem later will be built, and he offered the sacrifice to God. Now, I want to also mention about very importance of the sacrifice to Muslims. And we have this idea of Qurban Bayram. When the Muslims around the world are sacrificing many animals. And I will read, there is a festival, Eid al-Adha, and the Muslims around the world celebrate, I repeat, celebrate Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son for Allah, following the annual Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. So that's what they do, is that they bring camels, sheep, goats, cows, other animals. They bring as a sacrifice, they kill them. And my question is to Muslims, what are you doing with the sacrifice after that? And of course the answer is you cook it, you eat it. You divide it, you're supposed to divide the animal about sacrifice to the 3 parts. 1 part keep for yourself and your family, another part you give it to your friends or distant family, and the 3rd part you give it to to strangers. But that sounds like, for me, it's less than sacrifice what we know from the Bible, but it's more sacrifice of what they call Thanksgiving. So as we just go into the time of Thanksgiving, we have a turkey, we cook the turkey, and we thank God for all the provision He give it to us. So that's what you're actually doing. You're eating the sacrifice and you thank God for provision. But let us focus on the actual story of Abraham trying to bring sacrifice to God. So let me read from Genesis 22, verse 2. I have to remind you what God asked Abraham to do. He said, offer him there for a burnt offering. Very important. See, the problem is, in Islam, there is no concept of sacrifice. In the Torah and in the entire Old Testament, God talked Jews and teach them how many different sacrifices they should offer in different circumstances. Sin offering and burnt offering, they are offering when you don't eat anything from it. So let's read in the verse 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him for the burnt offering instead of his son. Now, can you see it? Of course, Abraham didn't even plan to kill his son, cook it, and use it as a food. Also, he didn't even use a ram to do the same thing. So he took the ram and he made it as a burnt offering. So it means he burned complete sacrifice and didn't touch it. So my suggestion to you, my Muslim friends, if you want to sacrifice, bring a sacrifice in a commemoration of what Abraham did or tried to do by the command of God. Next time you kill sacrifice, you burn it, don't eat it. Also, I want to ask you about, is it okay to bring haram animal, non-kosher, to God, to Allah? Of course not. So is it okay for you to bring a pig as a sacrifice to God? Well, I don't think it is a good idea. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about what kind of animals are kosher, what kind of animals are halal, what are haram, according to Leviticus. And I'm going to read from Leviticus 11, from verse 1 to 8. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Those are the beasts which you shall eat among all the beasts which are on earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and chewed the cud among the beasts, that shall you eat. Nevertheless, those shall you not eat from them that chew the cud, or from them that divide the hoof. And now the first example is the camel, because he chewed the cud, but divided not the hoof. He is unclean, haram unto you. And verse 7, and the swine, through he divide the hoof, and be cloven-footed, yet he chewed not the cud. He is unclean to you. Of their flesh, of a camel and a swine, shall you not eat, and their carcasses shall you not touch. They are unclean to you. Now I want to tell you, my Muslim friends, as you know, according to the Quran, Allah said that He prepared for Muslims or for Muhammad many sacrificial camels to bring as a sacrifice to Allah. And Muhammad brought sacrifice to Allah, many camels he killed. And it seems like okay for Muslims, for you right now to kill camel, because it seems like camel is very expensive animal. So you show your piety of sacrificing a lot, which is fine in itself. But what I try to tell you, that if you want to bring clean sacrifice to God, you must not bring sacrifice of the swine and of the camel as well. Please be conscious about that. And now I'd like us to talk about a very important and probably most misunderstood subject among Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Question is, was Muhammad an Arab of Quraysh tribe, a descendant of Ishmael? And for that we have to look to the Hadith. Sahih Bukhari, volume 4, book 55, number 592. The Prophet passed by some persons of the tribe of Aslam practicing archery. Allah's apostle said, O offspring of Ishmael, practice archery, as your father was a great archer. In a hadith number 607, Allah's apostle said, On the night of my ascension to heaven, I saw the prophet Moses, and I saw Jesus, and I resembled prophet Abraham more than any of his offspring does. So here we have a very interesting claim. Muhammad said that he looked like Abraham, even more that Ishmael looked like him. So he was almost like a twin brother. It's not only Islam claim about to bring message of monotheism, going back to Abraham as he was worship God. So Muhammad also claimed he's not only restoring the true worship of Abraham, also he said, I am in his descendant and I'm it will look like him. So we're gonna read a little bit about the Hadith 583, narrated Ibn Abbas. And he said, She Hagar lived in that way in Mecca area till some people from a tribe of Juram or family from Juram passed by her and her child. Now in the previous episodes we established that Abraham never traveled to Mecca. He never brought Hagar and Ishmael to Mecca. But nevertheless, let us move on and with this hadith and focus on other detail. Let's continue. The child Ishmael grew up and learned Arabic from them, and his virtues caused them to love and admire him as he grew up. And then he reached the age of puberty. They made him marry a woman from amongst them. Well, that's a very interesting statement. And I think we should go now for the Torah and see if the Torah has anything to say about it. Go to Genesis 21, verse 20 and 21. And God was with the lad, and he grew, and he dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of land of Egypt. So first of all, my Muslim friends said me that the wilderness of Paran is supposed to be in Mecca, but I will focus first on the last point of this verse. His mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. Let us compare these two stories. According to the Hadith, 12 sons of Ishmael, supposed to be by blood, 25% Chaldean through Abraham, 25% Egyptian through Hagar, and 50% Arab through the wife. According to the Torah, 12 sons of Ishmael, supposed to be by blood, 25% Chaldean through Abraham, 75% Egyptian from Hagar and wife of Ishmael, and 0% Arabs. So we have a problem. The immediate descent of Ishmael were not Arabs. But if you say, well, if he lived in Mecca, he died there, and eventually his descendants married the Arabs and they became assimilated. Well, let's look a little bit further in the story from the Torah, of the story from Genesis 37, verse 25, about the story of Joseph. And as they brothers throw Joseph into a pit, they sat down to eat the bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. We have to look at the map and reconstruct the sequence of events. Jacob asked Joseph to go from Hebron to check welfare of his brothers, and he moved up to Shechem, and it's about maybe several days of walk. He couldn't find them there, so he went up north to Dothan. And there they saw him, they seized him, throw him in the pit. And now the company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, as you see in the map, the place is just east from the Jordan River, of the place Joseph was waiting in the pit for decision supposed to be done by his brothers, what to do with him. Now what happened is Ishmaelites coming on the usual road to go down to Egypt, and they're crossing the mountains, and they're going to the coastal area, and then they go down south. So they purchased Joseph by accident, without planning it really. So therefore, if that's the case, supposedly, if the hadith is true, and Ishmael lived in Mecca, died in Mecca, and his grandsons now living in Mecca, going down to Egypt, as we look at the map, in order for them to reach Egypt, they have to go up to the Gulf of Aqaba, and then turn left, cross Sinai Desert into the Egypt. But in order for them to purchase by accident Joseph, or just to get Joseph by accident from the pit, they have to swing north from that Gulf of Aqaba for no apparent reason, then get the Joseph and realize they're going to Egypt, and went back. So I think no Arab trader will ever do such a detour for no apparent reason. So it doesn't make sense. If Ishmaelites were living in Mecca, they couldn't purchase Joseph in Dothan,